Laurie. Hi, everyone attending. Thank you so much for having me on today. My name is Ivor Plecas, as you can see on the chart, and our topic today is healthy habitual change in organizations. A few words on myself. I'm the managing director of Kingdom Noel. We are a small consultancy in Cologne in Germany. We are active all around the globe, and our focus is organizational culture. So we aim to transform the insights and learnings of modern sociology into tools for businesses to be better able to deal with artifacts regarding behavior or human teams or group dynamics, especially in the task of improving group efficiency and also going through tough times through changes or adopting new technology. If you have any further questions about me or the company, let's put that to the end of the session. I want to dive right into our topic because normally I expect a lot of questions because it's a sometimes very complicated topic. So we tried to focus on two aspects for today when talking about change and healthy transformation, and it's these two. We think that to fully understand change in an organization, there are two core concepts that one needs to be familiar with. The one is the concept of routines, which is something that we're all familiar with, but rarely dive into on a theoretical basis. And the principal agent problem, which might be familiar to some of you, especially if you're in a leadership management role. But if not, well, we're going to teach you all about it today, at least in a short overview. So what we're going to do is go through these two concepts and then expand on their combination and how they create the context of successful change or unsuccessful change in some cases. So number one, routines. Routines are a pretty amazing thing. You can boil it down to saying that everything that used to be a challenge for you, but now happens almost automatically, is a routine. This is an effect that comes from a special property of the human brain. Simply put, we have the gift of rational, deliberate thought, of deep thought and analysis. And this is something that costs the brain a lot of time, a lot of energy. If some of you have read the very popular Kahneman book, this is the slow thinking part. And then all of the rest of the brain is pretty much capable of doing really, really fast thinking right up on the feet without you actually even noticing it. The way this came to be is that, of course, deliberate slow thought uses up a lot of calories, and our forefathers living in the savannah, hunting and gathering, and maybe having one berry in their whole lifetime, their brains were looking for ways to save energy, and so the brain started looking for repeating patterns in behavior that basically turn out the same every time that they're done and don't really need rational thought and full focus anymore. Think about stuff like walking or opening a button, or maybe even more sophisticated physical stuff like serving a ball in tennis. All these things, the more you do them, the more second nature they become. You need to think about it less and less. At some point, you don't think about it at all. But routines also apply to mental stuff like speech or like behavior, like greeting people, for instance. And I want to illustrate a few of these routines just to make you aware of them, because one of the points about routines is that once you have them, you forget that you have them. So to illustrate, I'm just going to show you this. What you're doing while you're reading this is basically that you're looking at shapes, at various different shapes. We call them letters. And somehow these shapes in your mind transform into thoughts, ideas, and understanding. To you, this might seem like, yeah, of course, obviously, I learned how to read in first grade, but actually it's quite an achievement. We know from brain research that reading is very, very challenging, actually. And not only can you read simple letters as the one that we have on screen, but if I throw this at you, you're still capable of reading it. You actually have the ability in your reading routine to do something extremely complex and to even deviate a bit from the norm in understanding what is written. And the same applies if I just stop using squiggles and start using dots that are arranged in a manner that they resemble letters. So no matter what I do, once you have acquired the routine of reading, of looking at letters and words and starting to translate them into in your head into words and ideas, you cannot not read this. It is, in fact, so automatic you can't avoid doing it. If it looks like a letter, you will have a hard time seeing it as a shape and not reading it. So I'm going to give you one more toy to play with. Now, if I asked you to tell me what this is, I'm pretty sure that none of you would say, oh, it's a winding curve. Maybe some of the weird ones of you would say something along the lines of, well, it's an unfinished 8. But generally, all of you would say that it's an S. This is a routine in your mind at work. You are so routined at just taking certain shapes and just passing them on as letters that you've recognized that you're not aware of it, and that there's absolutely no way of you stopping yourself from doing that. Now, later today, you might be driving a car, and while driving, you will effortlessly be calculating the precise braking pressure needed to smoothly come to a stop at a traffic light, all while talking really complex numbers with your accountant on the phone. So just try to take a step back and understand how magical this is. You know, we're just starting to teach computers and cars to do this, and you can do it without thinking. Maybe think back to your first days in driving school when you were kind of really having trouble staying in the lane or accelerating or braking smoothly. And nowadays you just do it without thinking. When was the last time you were aware of driving? I bet it's quite a long time ago. The same goes to other things. Tomorrow morning, you will be tying your shoes again, and you will be coordinating your fingers with excellent precision. And please remember how, as a kid, all of these actions, reading, tying your shoes, unbuttoning a button, all of this was completely impossible. It was super exhausting. It seemed unsurmountable, and they were overwhelming challenges that you needed help with. And now look at yourself. You've become so routine at all of these things that you can do them with no attention at all, even though they're an amazing feat of your brain. Another aspect that is really cool about routines is that they do not only make complex actions easier, they actually make them better. Error correction is built in. I'm going to show you why. So I'm hoping that the effect of this didn't get completely lost. I think most of you should be able to read these sentences without any trouble, even maybe if it took a bit longer. But this is the cool thing about your brain creating routines. They not only make things easier, they correct any errors in the actual action of following the routine. And compare your feelings and your situation right now after reading this with this really complex, jumbled up set of words that were really a challenge. Compare that with this sense of exhaustion you had as you were maybe going through your first Dr. Seuss books, even in the simplified form of it. So the reason why all of this is possible is because routines are hard-coded in the brain over time. We actually fully understand how this works. This is the chart on the right. I do not expect you to understand it. I'm just showing you that basically this is how a routine becomes reinforced over time the more it is done. And we have a very full understanding of how routines actually are created and happen in the brain, because this is at the core of Parkinson's disease research. We know how cells rearrange when a routine is learned. And simply put, what the chart on the right shows is that it's as much about what you don't do as it is about what you do. And this is sadly the reality with Parkinson's disease. When somebody has Parkinson's, their systems in the brain that control what not to do kind of lose efficiency, and this is where the shaking comes from. So what we need to understand is that a routine is not just a series of fleeting, malleable thoughts that have somehow become reinforced in our view of the world. Every routine that we have is actually an arrangement of cells that is super specialized at doing something very specific. Every routine becomes its own tiny, actually present organ in the brain. Now, these routines can happen whenever we form habit, and it is of no consequence whether it's a good habit or a bad habit. A routine is a routine. So whenever you learn something really useful, like tying your shoes, or whenever you form a habit or a routine of doing something bad, like smoking or eating unhealthy food, the process creates an actual physical, biological structure in the brain. Basically, what your brain is creating for itself is a path of least resistance. This path, this course of action, is not necessarily the best way of doing something. It's just the way that you have repeated most often until it actually became its own small little organ in the brain and became very, very efficient at it. So this river could, of course, go straight to the right and not take the detour through Horseshoe Bend. But going through Horseshoe Bend is so much easier for this river than trying to break through this huge chunk of granite there. So, since a routine is not only comfortable, but also physically there in the brain, insight alone is not enough to kick a habit. In the words of one of my clients, who put this very bluntly and very beautifully, that makes sense. You can't remove an appendix by changing the patient's mindset. The cells are actually there, and you can't just make them disappear. Once a team, so I'm going to start segueing a bit into work life, once a team actually learns a set of routines, it is really, really hard to remove these routines because they are actually becoming physical realities in their heads. And no matter how many inspirational kickoff workshops and team events you do in order to say, we are going to change from tomorrow on, these structures remain. So the big question is, are we stuck with the way the river runs? We kind of are. There's no good way to actually change an existing routine. The better, smarter, more efficient alternative, the new thing that we could learn, will normally be recognized as better, smarter, and more efficient. But creating it would create immense effort and immediate discomfort to the people who would have to learn it, because they would be at a juncture. They could go left and say, well, this is how I always did it. It's comfortable, it's easy, I don't need to think about it. Or I can go the right way and invest a lot of time, effort, and lose a lot of efficiency along the way while I learn this better way. Now, the trick is, if we somehow happen to be, yeah, sure.
Just wanted to jump in really quick. I'm seeing like your desktop, yes. Is that correct? That's where we want to be, right?
No.
No, just wanted to jump on in. That's what we're seeing right now, is like a beautiful picture of maybe a river going through.
Oh yeah, that's Horseshoe Bend. No, that's not actually my desktop. That's just a river taking a curve. Sorry.
Okay.
So
okay. Do you want to?
That's actually one of my slides. Sorry, it's just a picture.
It's fine. All right, that's good.
Okay,
I just wanted
cool.
to make sure.
Thank you for making sure. Cool. All right. So basically, what are our takeaways regarding routines? Routines can massively reduce effort. This is one of the most breathtakingly awesome things about the human brain. We can take complex stuff and it suddenly becomes easy, whether it's dealing with travel expenses or operating on an open heart. The first time you do it, it's extremely challenging. After the 100th time, it becomes very easy. The second thing that is important about routine is that we're mostly not aware of them. And this is actually a good thing because this frees up our attention to deal with other things. Routines also have a form of error correction built in. And the important thing to understand is that they're not just thoughts. They're physically there as a bunch of cells that specialize in doing one thing well. In the context of business, this is how routines can be understood. So at the bottom of this pyramid on the left, we have the routines that are actually physically there, and they offer an attractive path of least resistance. It's attractive because this is what you get when you hire a professional. Hiring a professional means you're hiring not somebody who just knows how to do things, but he is super, super fit at doing them quickly, without any effort, and without blocking all of his attention. Now, by reducing effort, routines create work that is done efficiently and fast. So once I don't need to think about how a procedure goes, but I can actually do it while I'm talking to my colleagues about something else, work becomes super efficient and super fast. This is, bluntly put, where companies make their money. And the top part of the pyramid is the freed attention. And the freed attention is super decisive because once your attention is free, even though you're doing all of your daily chores and work, you can work on opportunities or even just be aware of opportunities coming up. So what needs to be understood here is that a routine can only be replaced by an even more effortless way of doing something. Now let's get to the other core concept that I mentioned before, which is the principal-agent problem. Now, a principal-agent relationship comes into existence when someone hires someone else to make decisions and take actions on their behalf. So the principal is the person who has a task and either doesn't know how or doesn't want to bother doing it, and hires somebody else to get that job done and hires them to get their job done on their behalf. To look at the whole set of this complex relationship would be a bit time exhausting. It would be a webinar all of its own, but I'm going to show you a simplified overview of what goes on here. Let's first look at the principal. So the principal can offer incentives in an boss-employee relationship. This is, of course, pay and benefits. The principal hires somebody in order to delegate tasks, and the principal has the power advantage. So the principal gets to decide things. The principal gets to sometimes even end the relationship without the agent agreeing. And one of the most important points, and the most important one for us today, is that he acts in his own self-interest. Now the agent, and I'm going to go bottom to top here, is hired to take action on behalf of the principal. He has one really great advantage, which is the hidden action or the unobserved effort. So basically, once the agent actually starts doing his job, most of the time the principals are not aware of the details and the actual goings on of this. So the agent has the information advantage. Otherwise would mean that the principal is micromanaging and that the return on investment for the agent would be very, very low. But the most important thing here as well is to say that the agent also acts in his own self-interest. And everything is great as long as the self-interest of the principal and the self-interest of the agent they don't need to necessarily align, but as long as they don't clash, everything is good. But when the principal's best interests are contrary to those of the agents, things get tricky. Let me show you a few examples of principal-agent at work. So when you are taking your car to the repair shop because, I don't know, a little light bulb went off, then you are the principal. It is your car, you have the power advantage, you are making all of the business decisions, but the car mechanic, he's the agent. And you can go and say, look, I have this weird little error light go on in my dashboard. Can you tell me what it is? And the mechanic will either be somebody who's very nice and he's going to go like, oh yeah, you have a really big problem with your engine here. Let me check it out for you and I'm going to try my best to do what I can. But there could also be other mechanics who say, well, this is just, an indicator for you to go and service your car. You need an oil change, but I'm going to use my information advantage and make you pay for more service than you actually need. So this is where the information advantage creates something called a moral hazard, where the agent is actually capable of doing things that are not good for the principal without the principal actually knowing. And you, as the principal, normally in such situations have no way of knowing whether you are facing a well-meaning agent or somebody who wants to take advantage of you. Same thing goes for another example, the relationship between legal counsel and a client is very often seen as one that is fraught with so-called moral hazard, where basically the course of action in some sort of legal battle, when the lawyer says, well, we should be doing things, the principal, of course, rightfully will ask, okay, I know nothing about legal issues, and is this person recommending this to me because this is the best course of action for me, or is this the best course of action for him regarding a prolonged process that results in more legal fees? And another third example is, of course, the classical the salary negotiations you have with your employees, where you are sitting at two ends of the table and trying to renegotiate your principal-agent relationship and trying to figure out whether you can align your self-interests or at least not make them clash. So, how do routines and the principal-agent problem interact in a situation requiring change? Now, the first thing that we need to just acknowledge as a reality, I'm pretty sure there's exceptions to this, but the reality is that the principal has the power advantage, even in a change situation. So what they're going to do in a change situation is they're going to act in their own best self-interest. So when change is required, this means that the bulk of the pressure typically ends on the agents. Basically, all right, we need to implement some new digital system. I need all of you people to learn how this works. I don't want to go too deep into it. This is why I hired you. Now, normally the conversation goes a bit like this. Here's how I want you to do things from now on. And the agent says, okay, that makes total sense. This is good for the company. Let's do it. But then something happens that most companies and most organizations are not aware of, which is that this pyramid, with all of its super nice benefits on the right, the moment that you start changing routines, so you basically are giving up old ways of doing things, you are giving up on old routines and starting to implement new ones. This is what happens. The routines that reduce effort that are there kind of disappear from daily work, and work is not done efficiently and fast anymore. In fact, the same steps it required to do, I don't know, accounting or managing your travel expenses, suddenly everything doesn't take 2 minutes, it takes about 10 minutes because I'm learning on the job. And also, all of the attention is directed inwards towards these changes that are going on. And yes, the new routines are loading and they are on their way and they will be kicking in at some point. But for now, in the first moment when changes begin actually taking ground, efficiency is almost completely lost. And any attention towards the market, towards opportunities, or sometimes even problems, starts just getting lost. This normally results in a set of, well, frustrating experiences, frustrating encounters. All of this can get very, very hard depending on the sort of change that an organization is going through and depending, of course, on the organization itself. This happens to a larger or to a smaller extent, but it definitely happens. So then something like this happens. The principals start looking at their results, quarterly results, monthly results, whatever, and they say, wait a minute. We thought up this really cool, new, better way of doing things around here, and our results are, well, either not improving or actually going down. And the agents are, well, we're doing exactly what you're asking us to do, and we're putting out so much effort, and we're really, really, really trying to make the best of it. But this is actually what comes out when we're using it. So one of the things that starts happening is that the agents start losing faith in the new thing that is being implemented, and the principals start losing faith in their agents. We actually have various numbers and various situations regarding this. I've brought one set of numbers that are fairly current. This is from a 2014 study where basically scientists were looking at the loss of return on assets during a shift to customer-centric structures. So you can see that actually while you are shifting towards a customer-centric structure, and this can mean many things to different people, you can expect for the first 2.5 years to have lessened returns on assets. And you can see that actually the average drop, and I'm talking the average drop, can be up to 39%. The actual drop can be a lot more catastrophic. So this is one of these typical things that happen during change. We have the kickoff point where the restructuring begins, and everybody knows that, of course, things are not going to just suddenly be golden and function really well. But most organizations are really, really, really shocked by figuring out how much of a loss in efficiency and productivity this means. So an average of 39 is really extreme. We can go up to, I think the top number was 91%. So this is where, of course, the the bend in the river comes into play again. This drop in productivity is exactly what happens when the river coming from the left is trying to smash through the rock to go straight instead of going through the horseshoe bend. Yes, theoretically, you can erode that hill bit by bit by bit by bit by bit until you can actually make a breakthrough. But the thing is, normally you're expected as an organization during this change process to perform as always, or at least to not perform catastrophically so that the company goes under. So you have all of these agents being tasked to do the impossible and tasked to keep the results going and keep the company alive. And you have this beautiful routine, the path of least resistance, going around the bend that is so, so, so sweet. And this is where one of the big truths of modern sociology and psychology comes into play. This is a quote by Carl Gustav Jung. Man is not a machine that can be remodeled as occasion demands, in the hope that it will go on functioning as regularly as before, but in a different way. When change happens, time needs to be allowed for. When change happens, there needs to be an awareness of a loss in efficiency. And most of the time, this loss in efficiency is going to be way more than any organization expects. And this is where one of the most catastrophic combinations of this comes into play, which is one of the advantages of the agent in the principal-agent relationship, which is the hidden action, the unobserved effort. There is a moment in a change project where the scales can tip both ways. Either an organization manages to face its problems straight on and be objective about it and find solutions together, or the agents are going to just start doing things the way they think they are right, and the principals are going to be none the wiser for it. So this is something that I know from my daily practice when I come into organizations and they tell us, look, we have this really cool, I don't know, market offensive going on, or since we are in a CRM user group here, we have bought this really, really cool CRM, but nobody is using it. This is where hidden actions come into play, because as long as you're performing, as long as you're still selling, nobody's going to look at you and say, well, why aren't you doing it right? Just to share a short anecdote from my practical life. So we had a customer in Western Germany, a very large, a very industrial, a very big, very global industrial supplier. with multiple hundreds of thousands of employees, and they introduced a new system for shift scheduling on the production lines. And basically, how production lines were doing their shift scheduling before was through Excel sheets. There was the shift foreman, and he just had his Excel chart, and everybody who wanted to have a certain shift or wanted to change shifts, they had to come to the shift foreman and ask him to do the change. Now, all of this was taking up a lot of the time that the shift foreman was actually having. So the new system actually more or less automatized all of the shift changing steps. So basically, if somebody wanted to change a shift, change their shift, an employee wanted to change the shift they're working in, they would just go and say, hey, I would like to switch Tuesday for Thursday. And then if somebody else was found who would switch shifts with him, the system just did that. And at some point, the company saw that this new system was not being used, and that the shift foremen were still using their old Excel solution. And so we were there and we spoke to the people, and we were trying to figure out what was wrong with it. And they were telling us, yeah, no, it's really hard to use. And our Excel, it works so well. It's like on a network drive. Everybody can see it. So everybody was really protecting this old way of doing things with a lot of panache, and nobody was using the new shift planning software. And then at some point, late in the evening, at an unofficial event, one of the shift foremen told me, well, there's a pretty simple reason we're not using it. Because once we don't do the shift planning anymore, we do not know what is going on in the shift. So basically, up until now, every time somebody came to me and wanted to change shifts, I could ask him, well, what's going on? Are you having trouble in your life? Or I could just, have a small conversation with that person. But suddenly with the new system, it meant that the shift foreman didn't have a structure anymore to be in contact with the multiple hundreds of people that were working for them in an assembly line. So this is one of these very simple points where the hidden action and unobserved effort advantage of the agent can have massive influence on how a change goes in a company, because they are just claiming that the new system is not working well, while in reality, it is just changing their reality and it is against their own self-interest. Now, enough of the example. My next question is, how can you actually counteract these developments? How can you work against this? One of the most important things to remember here is a statement from the very first part, is that an existing routine can only be replaced by an even more effortless way of doing something. So you will have a very hard time convincing people who have their very own little path of least resistance that they should be doing this 100-fold easier, 100-fold less complicated, but not easier thing for them. They're routine in their old ways. Everything new, even if it's smarter, is harder for them. So the big question here is, how do you make something unfamiliar, a new way of doing things, more effortless than something that is actually known? Well, actually, this is a question that is answered millions and millions of times each day in most contexts, and only in business transformation and change does it get completely lost. It's training. And I mean training up front. Training that happens before a new way of doing things is kicked off. Training until a new skill or a new method or a new way of doing things is actually mastered, and by being mastered is suddenly preferred because it becomes the path of least resistance. And this is the obvious standard in most professions. Like, just look at these two options. Which course of action seems more professional to you? Should a pilot first get a plane, just get into it and kind of figure out how to fly it on as he goes? Or should a new pilot maybe learn to fly first And then once he's become really, really familiar and comfortable in the situation and has dealt with everything that can go wrong, maybe only then they should be getting a plane. So most of the times in all professions around the world, of course, the first step is to learn to fly first and then get a plane. Now, very often when technology is bought in a corporate context, people kind of focus on which plane am I getting first, and then they say, well, we'll figure it out as we start using it. And this is where trouble happens. So I want to show you an example of actually acknowledging this and putting it to good use in real life. So remember this chart from before with the return on assets during a shift to customer-centric structures? We had another client, a conservative, mid-sized machine building corporate unit in Europe, in France, and they were switching to inside selling. Now, inside selling is a sort of new trend where salespeople don't begin by focusing on their product and their product features and so forth, but focusing on how a product relates to a customer's business. So it implies having deeper insights about a customer's business, deeper insights about how markets are developing and so forth. And we did a project with them where we said, okay, so before you start actually using this new system, let's maybe train to use the system. Let's maybe become routine with it before we actually go out and start using it. And it was a very, very extensive training program that was involved with this. And you can see here, the red curve, the top one, is the loss of ROA during this transition in this case. Now, it's a bit shifted because we actually started with a larger ROA than the example that we saw before. But if I just shift the curve downwards, you can actually see what happens here. So going into a bit more detail, the dark blue curve shows the loss of ROA that results both from an investment in a new way of doing things, but also in a loss of efficiency and productivity while things are going on, while everybody is learning. And looking at our project, the red curve, the loss in ROA is basically the same. So it's a loss of time that employees were able to invest into their markets. And it's, I think actually that the financial component wasn't even calculated in this. So basically these two charts need to be comparable. So you can see that what happened was that the loss of ROA wasn't as sudden, but it was a bit more measured because we said, okay, we're going to start training first and then figuring out how to do this right instead of just jumping right in. In essence, the difference in strategy is this. For the dark blue field, for the study that I'm actually referring to, they started dealing with the new way of approaching a market right at the moment of restructuring. For our client, our recommendation was to say, okay, don't restructure yet. Let's train everybody first. Let's have everybody fit and routined in the new ways and then only go to market. And this has changed significantly how the curve of the ROA went. So even though our client went to market with their new way of doing things much later, about 2 years after it was actually decided to start investing in it, their loss of ROA and their projected curve in a gain of ROA are significantly more optimistic than the one that is seen in average during the study. And actually, you can see, oh, sorry, I kind of mixed up. And the thing that we did was that the first step we started doing to figure out how to do this is that we set out to use a set of proven sociological diagnostics to figure out what sort of transition the agents would accept and support. Because, sorry, I need to jump around the charts a bit, because the dark curve, the early switch, for some organizations, this is the right way to go. but it is not the right way to go for all organizations. And the way to figure out what the right way to go is to actually understand what an organization can take. So what we figured out using our diagnostic tools was that the organization we were working with needed the switch to happen later. They needed the training first and then the switch later. Theoretically, there might have been an organization that would have been much, much better at learning on the job than learning before it actually happens. But for our organization, this was correct. So we actually just did a few diagnostics, very baseline, simple diagnostics. These are just example pictures, by the way. It had nothing to do with Senegal. And then we implemented a series of training sessions that were customized to the requirements, not of the business only, not of the principals only, but also of the agents. So basically, we did training sessions that were super old-fashioned, bluntly speaking, for the older colleagues that were involved in the transition to inside selling. And we also did very progressive training sessions with people who were ready to experiment a bit more and try out a bit more and just more open to inside selling than the others were. And you can actually see the moment in the chart where the new methods began gaining traction. So the moment that I've circled with the gray circle shortly before year one, this was after the bulk of the initial training had already happened. This was where the colleagues that were involved in the training exercise actually started using the stuff that were teaching them for the new way of doing things after the transformation. They were actually already beginning to apply the newly learned knowledge on their old ways of doing things. So basically, even if we hadn't done the switch at year two, possibly they would have already had a gain in efficiency just by learning these things in a way that acknowledges their best self-interests. So to summarize all of this, how do you actually make change work? The first and most important point is to acknowledge that the path of least resistance is at the core of efficiency. This is what makes all of the people in an organization productive. Doing things the way they're done makes them do stuff efficiently. It might not be the smartest way, it might not be the most profitable way, but it is the easiest way of doing something. And this efficiency is super valuable if done right, but it is also the biggest obstacle to change because it is a very, very stable property of behavior in humans. The second thing that needs to be acknowledged is that you can't just demand change. Change needs to be attractive to those who need to put it into action. It must be in the agent's best self-interest. And I'm not talking about the agent being clear about the fact that this is the best thing for the organization, but this needs to be good for the agent themselves. If a transformation costs them 4 hours more of work each day, every day until they go into retirement, they will not accept it and it will not work. And the third essence is, do not expect technology to do everything. A plane can fly, but it requires a trained, routine crew to not crash. So even despite the fact that technology is at the core of many transformations and many change processes in companies today, it still doesn't mean that technology can compensate everything. People need to be aware of the needs of those who will be using that technology. And normally you would expect them to be treated as pilots. We'll teach you how to fly it before you're actually forced to hold it in the air and make sure that it doesn't crash with passengers in the back. And before we go on to questions, I want to wrap up with one of my favorite quotes. It is from Buckminster Fuller, sorry. And it goes like this: you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Thank you very much.
All right, fabulous, fabulous, Ivor. Thank you so very much for presenting today. You did a fabulous job. Yes, questions. If anybody has questions, now is the time. I'm having a little issues with my questions panels, but I believe they should be coming in at this point. So go ahead, raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question live. For everybody, I apologize I didn't say at the beginning, we did have a comment on that. We did record today's session. We'll get it posted to our content library along with the deck that Ivor used here today. I'll give us a couple hours, and we're usually pretty quick at getting them posted. If you registered for the event, you will receive the link to your inbox as well. So you can watch again, share with others, whatever you would like to do. At this time, I think we will wrap up. Ivor, thank you so much for your time today. Very much appreciated.
Sure, you're welcome. It was very fun.
All right, everybody have a great day, and we'll look forward to seeing you back on a webinar real soon. Take care.
Laurie, can you still hear me? All right.